Cricket is a strange and vicious pastime invented by Englishmen. Poets, actors, suicides, alcoholics, psychotics, sex maniacs and sociopaths are drawn to it like moths to a flame. Where the obsession springs from, why one family member develops it and another doesn't, is often a deep mystery. None of his grandparents spoke English as a first language, yet all his life, Harold Pinter, poet, outsider, piss-taker, loved cricket with every cell of his being. In the late spring of 1981, I was 19 and chauffeuring a Rolls-Royce around South London for a dodgy property developer. In my spare time, I was auditioning for drama schools and playing club cricket when I could. One day a friend rang to ask if I fancied a game. I said thanks, but no. He said, "Harold Pinter will be there. It's his team, Gaieties." I wanted to meet Harold Pinter, so I played. Harold wasn't playing that day. He patrolled the boundary in black. Black trousers, black polo neck, black jacket, black sideburns. He smoked black Russian Sobranis. Through black spectacles he concentrated entirely on the game. He didn't say much to anyone. He slugged scotch from a hip flask. The match over, he said to me, "So you're Burton, are you? Jolly good. Well, you're playing for us now. All right?" It wasn't an invitation. 28 years later, I still am. I knew next to nothing about him in 1981. But a few years earlier, I'd seen No Man's Land at the National Theatre, starring John Gielgud and Ralph Richardson. On a set dominated by a vast cocktail cabinet, two inebriated elderly men drank liquor and conversed obscurely, while a pair of somewhat uncouth younger men mocked them. Something happened to me watching that play. I didn't understand a word, but something penetrated my teenage skull, something to do with words directed as weapons, conflict simmering and shimmering, silence. I felt a mysterious sense of participation. It wasn't so much what was being said that excited me, but somehow the mysterious pleasure of hearing it and inhaling the febrile atmosphere in which it was uttered. I was intoxicated by the heady excess of language, the jagging rhythms, changes of pace, the irresistible, delicious, unbearable tension, the fantastic swearing, and it was funny. Only later did I learn that all four characters in No Man's Land bear the names of extraordinary English cricketers: Hurst, Spooner, Briggs and Foster. Only now he's gone am I beginning to understand something about Pinter's lifelong, obsessive passion for cricket, his deep knowledge of its history and love of its characters. "Cricket was very much part of my life from the day I was born," Harold told Brian Johnston in a Test Match special interview in 1980, in which Johners refers to Harold as Pinters. Harold went on, "In the 1930s, the whole of England loved cricket, I think. That was my impression as a child, anyway." There was no obvious family connection. Cricket was integral to the time in which he was born. When the air raids came, Harold grabbed his bat. When he was evacuated, the bat accompanied him to Cornwall. In 1944, a rumour reached Harold, aged 14, that the Americans were going to play baseball at Lord's. He telephoned the secretary of the MCC. "I'm a London schoolboy. This report that the Americans are going to play baseball at Lord's is the most disgraceful thing I've ever heard." "My dear fellow," said the secretary, "you shouldn't take these reports too seriously. I don't think we're actually going to allow it to happen." Harold and his schoolmates played cricket whenever they could. There's a black and white photo of Harold's Hackney gang, aged 16 or so, 8 of them in school uniform, except Harold. He's at the end of the row, a white knight in full cricket kit, hands behind his back, broad in the beam, flannels beautifully pressed, blancoed boots, sleeves rolled up, collar dashingly high, handsome as a Renaissance prince, absolutely ready to do battle. His mates look like they've got essays to write, mothers to cook and wash for them. Harold's ready for life. He first saw greats like Wally Hammond and Keith Miller at Lord's in the Victory Test of 1945. But earlier, during a brief stay in Yorkshire, he'd seen Len Hutton batting and found his lifelong hero. Hutton's 13-hour Ashes innings of 364 at the Oval in 1938 must have made a profound impression on a young cricketer like Harold, a peerless model of heroic grit and sheer bloody-minded determination to keep hold of your most valued possession, whether it be wicket or freedom. Harold was a complex young man. He knew he possessed innate power, and with it a certain ruthless cunning. He cheated at football, stole his chum's girlfriend. His courage was the stuff of myth, snarling defiantly while surrounded by black-shirt thugs. It takes some guts for an 18-year-old to refuse the army's call-up, declare himself a conscientious objector, endure arrest and trial. It's odd then to think of him as a shy person. Nevertheless, in later life, when a friend told him he'd shaken Len Hutton's hand, Harold was genuinely envious. "You shook Hutton's hand? I'd have been too shy." Hutton, a working-class boy from Pudsey, was the first professional cricketer to captain England, a quiet, determined Yorkshire lad whose talent was rooted in an iron will, as it had to be in pre-war England in order to fulfil its true potential. His extraordinary youthful success must have fired the imagination of many working-class lads. Harold was in awe of the elegant economy of Hutton's play. "Hutton was never dull," he wrote. "His bat was part of his nervous system. His play was sculptured. His forward defensive stroke was a complete statement." Young Len Hutton loved to watch Don Bradman batting, and noticed he seemed never to hit the ball to a fielder. Similarly, Harold's earliest plays had the ability to split the field, to find the gaps in the audience's expectations, to wrest the initiative from the opposition and dictate the pace. And just as Harold's first major theatrical innings, The Birthday Party, was a catastrophe, so Hutton in his first test made 0 and 1. An influence on Hutton was George Hurst, a senior Yorkshire cricketer who went out of his way to mentor the younger man. Hurst is the only cricketer ever to have made 2,000 runs and taken 200 wickets in the same season. Hutton developed his temperament and technique by watching and listening acutely to the older, wiser players around him, men who had lived and survived life's great ordeals. Later in life, Hutton went out of his way to pay special tribute to George Hurst. Nothing had meant more to him than the love and wisdom of his mentor. The youthful Pinter had a similar instinct to seek out men with outstanding talents, men whose strength, character and determination drove them to extraordinary achievements. And young Pinter shared Hutton's thirst for the counsel of older, wiser men. First came Joseph Brearley, Harold's Hackney Downs Grammar School English master, who introduced him to acting and literature. Their friendship lasted until Brearley's death. At drama school, Harold was taught by Stephen Joseph, who later invited him to Scarborough to direct the second production of The Birthday Party. Seeking personal contact with writers he admired, Harold found W.S. Graham, one of his favourite poets, in an after-hours Soho drinking den. 18 and fearless, he made his move. "Excuse me, Mr. Graham, I just wanted to tell you how much I admire your poetry." "Why don't you piss off?" came the reply. Later they became friends. Harold championed, published and supported W.S. Graham for the rest of his life. Pinter, like Hutton, did not give his opponent an inch. Anyone who played cricket, or tennis, bridge, ping-pong or any other competitive sport with Harold found that out pretty quickly. And when the game was on, Harold, like Hutton, rarely spoke to an opponent. It was combat to the bitter end. He demanded silence, and sometimes got it, even on the cricket field, although occasionally at the cost to small children of confused tears. When latterly Harold umpired in Gaiety's games, his concentration was fierce. He indulged no back-chat with the bowler, and only very, very occasionally succumbed, quite involuntarily, to the temptation to raise a partisan finger. Once, legend has it, when no Gaiety's fielder had actually appealed. Hutton was a mirror, his cricketing genius a reflection of Harold's yearning for direct experience of life's moment-to-moment significance. "Always for me," he wrote of Hutton, "a sense of his vulnerability, of a very uncommon sensibility. He attended to the particular, but rarely lost sight of the context within which it was taking place." He could have written that about himself. Gaiety's Cricket Club was founded in 1937 by musical comedy star Lupino Lane, leaseholder at the time of the Gaiety Theatre on the Strand. Gaiety's is a wandering side of no fixed abode. Harold's involvement with the club evolved in the late 1960s. Daniel, Harold's son, was being coached in the nets at Alf Gover's. Gover's cricket school occupied a space above a garage in Wandsworth. It was absolutely freezing. There was no run-up for the bowlers and barely room to swing a cat. One day, Harold padded up to face a few from one of the coaches, Fred Palozzi. Fred played for Gaieties and asked Harold if he fancied a game. In his first match, Harold went out to bat, thrust his front leg down the wicket and played a beautiful straight drive right out of the middle of the bat, smack into the hands of the bowler. Out first ball, caught and bowled. But within a few years, Harold was captain. Gaieties is not an easy team to lead. One Sunday, while fielding and having dropped 2 sitters, Harold resigned his captaincy on the spot. His vice-captain had disagreed with the decision and called him a very short, very sharp word. So he resigned and, not very democratically, declared the vice-captain duly elected. In the next game, the new captain asked Harold for advice on what to do regarding a crucial tactical decision. "I haven't the faintest idea," replied the ex-captain. In a dusty corner of his study, Harold kept the Gaieties archive. The scorebooks start in 1970. That season, Harold had a pretty grim time of it with the bat. In the first 6 games, he scored 0, 0, 10, 1, 10 and 0. Gaieties' opening bowler in the first game of the 1970 season against Twickenham is Arthur Wellard. In 1970, Wellard, ex-England and Somerset, is 68 years old. He bowls 17 overs and takes 5 for 36. The wicketkeeper is Tom Stoppard. Playing with Arthur Wellard meant the world to Harold. Arthur wasn't impressed by playwrights or movie stars. He'd seen it all in his days with Somerset in the 1930s, bowled at Bradman, Hammond and the odd Maharaja. He was very rigorous with Harold, helping him to improve his game. Arthur had lived a happy life entirely devoted to playing cricket. Harold loved that. As a pro, Wellard's 6-hitting was the stuff of myth. Even in his Gaieties' twilight, he was capable of explosive match-winning hitting. Harold could hit the odd 6 himself, but one grim Sunday he batted for over an hour with uncharacteristic grit to see out a draw. Afterwards, Arthur said, "I was proud of you, son." A blessing like that from an old warrior like Arthur Wellard meant as much to Harold as anything. On Test Match Special, approaching his 60th birthday, Harold said he still regarded himself as a promising batsman. His top score for Gaieties was 39. I played with him enough to know he could drive beautifully, and on the onside, but he had a fatal tendency to fall victim to the rush of blood. Len Hutton once said that one of the great problems of his life had been to learn to relax. Harold, it must be said, never fully mastered the art of relaxed batting. "Foreigners tend to think cricket's a peaceful game," he said. "Obviously it's not. It's a very, very violent activity. What continues to amaze me about cricket is that every game possesses tremendous tension, drama. Every game you play, it's all new every time you play." Harold was Gaieties, still is, always will be. He belonged to the club for more than half his lifetime. Each year, in fading light, the season's last match over, he'd recite from Francis Thompson's poem At Lord's, binding together for the long winter, and now for eternity, our game, our club, the opposition, the land, and the other world. For the field is full of shades as I near a shadowy coast, and a ghostly batsman plays to the bowling of a ghost. And I look through my tears on a soundless clapping host, as the run-stealers flicker to and fro, to and fro. Oh, my Hornby, and my Barlow long ago.